Hello and welcome to Raise a Glass, the podcast where we talk about the stories and storytellers that shape us. My name is Eric Lintola,
And I am Hunter Dansin.
and today we have a very special episode to bring you. Not only is it the end of our first season of Raise a Glass, a season that has discussed everything from sci-fi to The Godfather and Taylor Swift to Fool's Crow. Man, we've talked about a lot of different things.
Yeah.
We talked about,
She-Hulk.
Linkin Park and Need to Breathe.
Right. Yeah.
We've been all around.
Yeah.
It's exciting. Some of our favorite B movies.
Mm-hmm.
Tolkien. We talked for like 2 hours about Tolkien.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, Godfather was, I think, actually our longest one.
I guess that makes it. I mean, that one actually might be the longest. It might take longer to watch those movies than to read the trilogy. um, yeah, and of course, who could forget Macbeth? That was a joy too.
Right.
So not only is it the end of our first season, but it is also the very first opportunity we have to speak with a storyteller. We've spoken about storytellers that shape us, and today I get to bring to you one of my favorite storytellers, storyteller I have a personal connection with and have gotten to know over the last 10 years. A voice that actually might be pretty familiar to most of you if you've listened before. We're going to be discussing Dawn Must Follow Night, the book without any participles. Right, that's the right word for the and but.
Sure.
Isn't that?
Yeah.
Isn't
I think so.
I just that was a joke there. I was trying to for what it's worth. We're going to be discussing Dawn Must Follow Night, and we're going to do an interview with the author. But as per our normal approach, before we dive too deeply into that, Hunter, I got to know what's in your glass.
I have some peppermint tea, which might not make sense, but I actually have one of my earliest experiences writing that I think was kind of formative for me was more or less. It was in seventh grade when Mrs. Callender had a challenge for the class, a writing challenge. She gave us a prompt, and she gave us a certain amount of time to write a kind of short story on the prompt. It was like imagining a future classroom.
Okay.
And so I imagined the future classroom. And people were using like PDAs. I called them PDAs back then.
Ooh,
But now they got Chromebooks and
public
everything.
displays of
So
affection.
yeah, or personal data. I don't know what it stands for.
Oh,
But
okay, so okay. Whew, different
yeah,
type of classroom.
yeah. But the reward was a peppermint for whoever wrote the best story, and the class voted on the story. You closed your eyes, and she read all of the stories, and
Okay.
then the class voted. So it was like anonymous, and I won.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many students were in this class? Was she reading like 20 stories or?
I don't know. I feel like there was around 10.
Okay.
So
It feels more manageable.
yeah,
Just
and
imagining reading like 25 stories out loud.
yeah, but they were like, we wrote them in like 5 minutes. So
Okay. You're right. They're little. Yeah.
yeah.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Calendar. I
I can't
love
believe that's a real
peppermints.
last name.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make month jokes and day jokes
Mm-hmm.
with the last name like calendar.
Yeah.
That's great. I bring to you the humble ice water.
Okay.
I've realized there's a real challenge with this weekly prompt. I feel like I always need to bring something that's lively and In reality, I walk around with an Nalgene bottle everywhere I go,
Hmm.
like everywhere. The only place I don't bring it into is like if we're invited over for dinner, like,
Uh
and
huh.
it's somebody that like, wants to serve water or whatever. I'll bring it in our car and leave it in the car and go in. My wife brings it in, her own in, but like to the extent where when my son's playing, he'll go for my phone, which means, of course, I'm spending too much time on the phone, or my water bottle. Um,
Right.
those are the two things he goes for. So,
Yeah.
and we have a new fridge that has an ice dispenser, and it's very exciting. So this did not come at the cost of filling up ice cube trays. It came at the cost of hitting a button. Hunter, is there anything you're raising that you're raising a glass or pouring one out for this week?
Um, I'm raising a glass to Horizon Forbidden West, which is a sequel to a video game on PlayStation. Um, you can't get it on PC now, but it's launched as just a PlayStation game. I played the first one, Horizon Zero Dawn, and I absolutely loved it. I beat the game on Ultra Hard, New Game Plus, got the Platinum Trophy, did
Whoa.
pretty much everything. Um, it's not a revolutionary game, but it combines the best elements of a lot of different RPGs, and puts them in this really interesting world, in this really fun and unique combat system. There's like you mostly fight these big machines, and some of them kind of look like robot dinosaurs,
Okay.
and but they're like really futuristic and cool looking, and there's all different components that you can shoot off and stuff in the combat. And I just got the sequel, and I've started playing it, and I'm absolutely loving it. And it is honestly like in my top five all time video games. So
Okay.
Horizon
I
Zero
got
Dawn, Horizon Forbidden West.
the the
Good
closest I've
time.
ever come to anything like that, Hunter, is Horizon Fun Effects, which was a roller skating and laser tag place as a kid,
Oh,
which
okay.
I don't really think has any way of coming anywhere close to that. That sounds awesome.
Well, you played Breath of the Wild, right? Zelda?
With you?
No.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes.
It.
That was fun.
Yeah. It's that kind of experience.
Okay,
But
okay. Thank you for putting it in terms I can understand. I appreciate that. That's cool.
uh,
Are you pouring one out for anything?
I'm pouring one out for batteries. Uh, when you have when you have a child who loves Hess trucks, and
Mm.
people get him Hess trucks for Christmas, for his birthday. His grandpa had a big collection of Hess trucks that he passed on, and he absolutely loves them. Um, but Hess trucks take C batteries,
Oh, C. Are
and
those
they
those big
die.
circular ones?
Yeah, they're the huge ones.
Who know? I didn't think this
They're not
existed.
circular. They're just like a giant double A, really fat
Okay.
double A. Um,
Sorry. They're cylindrical.
yes,
My bad. Not
yeah,
circular.
yeah, cylindrical. Um, and they die really fast in the Hess trucks. And they each truck takes two of them. So we put new batteries in his new Hess truck. Um, we had a little family Christmas before going to visit our other families for Christmas, and we put in his new Hess truck, and it died in like 2 days.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
yeah, and so it's two batteries per truck, and like I'm not going to go out and just be buying C batteries all the time, and just batteries in general. Like in where I live, I haven't found a convenient way to recycle them. Like you have to ship them
Mm.
somewhere and pay, and it's not cheap. So it's like
Yeah.
I have all these batteries that I haven't recycled yet, and it's just I don't like dealing with batteries. It's just got to pour one out.
Yeah. Wow. It's a lot
But
going on there.
yeah, sorry. How about you? Um,
Yeah, I'm going to raise a glass to, and this might be a little bit controversial for some people out there, to coworkers and holiday parties.
uh,
I know that's not something that many people look forward to, but both Melanie's and my coworkers are just awesome people that we love spending time around. And we had a group of them over on Sunday, earlier this week, and shared a meal and desserts, and it was just a lot of fun. We're both people that thrive around other people,
mm.
and so is our son. And so it was just a lot of just excitement and happiness in this space, and it's a nice thing. It's not ultimately, right, the reason for the season. We talked about that when we talked about Behold the Lamb of God, but it's, I think they get a worse rap than maybe they should. And I think there's a real way that you can add honesty and relationship to them. They don't need to be focused on what you're drinking or eating. So yeah, I'm gonna raise a glass to that, and did something somewhat similar with my coworkers today. I had a little party for a birthday and just
hmm
hanging out together, and saw went to another coworker's house last week and just had a good time. So that's what I'm raising a glass to. And I'm gonna pour one out for icy steps and all
Oh
of
yeah.
the pieces that go along with that as winters come. Uh, I just don't like slippery steps, and so I got more ice melt, whatever, for our driveway. And I was pouring the bag of ice melt into the bucket that had the previous salt or whatever, and it was so salty and or whatevery that
Mm.
just the act of pouring the salt into the empty bucket filled my mouth with the taste of salt. Like I needed to I felt like I needed to rinse my
mm.
mouth out. My mouth is feeling salty saying that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the dangers that come with that, slipping. I almost took a dive today
Mm.
on some ice. It's just not. I could do without that.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah. We don't have any. Well, we had snow and then it all melted and it hasn't been cold enough to have ice down here in Connecticut.
That's nice. I hope it doesn't get that cold.
Well, I want
I hope
snow,
it gets
so
snowy, but not icy.
yeah.
Sorry, let me clarify that. I love snow.
Yeah.
And I know you love it even more as an avid skier. So, well, Hunter, let us dive into our discussion today. I know I shared some questions with you beforehand, but I would love to take some time to talk about this book, about you as an author, about things that you're working on in the same series. Are you up for that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a vanity episode. um, that's my first interview, so that's something. Um, Milestone. But
I'm.
yeah, I love talking about writing, as you know. I
Mhm.
think a lot of our conversations once you get me started talking about writing, it's one of the few things that I just can't stop talking about. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm gonna let you ask the questions, and because I don't want to lead my own vanity episode. That'd be a little too much to stomach, I think.
Well, I'm so excited for this. I've been excited for this since before we started this podcast. But this is one of the big pieces of starting the podcast. Is for me, I really wanted to celebrate you as a storyteller, and I just gonna say it straight out. Like, I think everybody should read this book. Um, I One of the things I tell my friends and family, and I've bought this book for many family members. I've gotten friends to read it. It's what, $12.99 or something like that. It's not that expensive.
Yeah, paperback is $12.99 and ebook is like $3.
Yeah, everybody look up Dawn Must Follow Night on Amazon. Where else is it being sold?
Barnes and Noble and Kobo, and you can actually read it for free on tapas.io.
I would encourage you, if you decide to do that, to then support Hunter through his Patreon. There's a lot of work that goes into writing that we as readers often don't think about. And to be able to support storytellers and kind of enable more storytellers to tell their stories is really important. And I know, Hunter, you're not in it for the money, but
No.
it does allow the capacity to write more stories. So I want to say that up front. And before we get into it, so Hunter, I'm going to start with a little bit of kind of my summary of Dawn Must Follow Night.
Okay.
This is unlike many of our episodes. This is going to be a primarily spoiler-free episode. There will be a couple pieces that I'm going to ask that might spoil some things that come up. But even with that, I would say this is fully something that you should read. Buy it for a friend, buy it for a family member. Like I said, I've done it. You should do it too.
I think you might be the largest percentage of my profits from this book. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. I enjoy it. So I'm now working through my second full read. But I think I've read parts of it 3 or 4 times, if not more.
Yeah. I'm also doing an audiobook too, releasing chapters on YouTube. My Patreon benefit is you get like an RSS feed of just the audio. But yeah, I mean, my primary focus right now is on working on book 2, but I'm doing that as well to try and get it out there.
Yeah, and I've listened to a few of those as well, and I really enjoy them. So, like I always say, you have a great podcast face. I mean voice. Sorry. I just face. Yeah. It's always think about that myself about myself. So, yeah. But Dawn Must Follow Night by Hunter Dansin is a story about the Black and the Blades. It begins with a character named Kavar fleeing the owner of a bread stand, just trying to survive as a kid in the city. And the next thing you know, he ends up in a castle with the Blades. And he is being trained along with a lot of other kids, all of them preteens, if not younger, to prepare for the next cataclysm and the coming of the Black, and the beasts that come out of the Black. These cataclysms happen once about every 100 years, and the Blades um, are the neutral group of people that are there to protect the world from the black. And so as the story progresses, we meet other characters like the High Justice.
Yeah.
That's Lothan.
Lothan. Yeah.
Lothan. And um, I'm I'm gonna get her name wrong. Alera.
Yep.
Um, and an ever growing group of characters who represent different kingdoms or fiefdoms or other parties who are trying to vie for power in this world. And as all of this is going on, a cataclysm happens.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give away too much more than that. But I will say that one of the most unique pieces, or two of the most unique pieces of this book, one is the day system. What happens with night and with light and dark? That's hence the dawn must follow night, and we'll talk about that in this conversation with Hunter. The other piece is the black. The black is not darkness like the black of night. It is, and it's not even just a substance. It seems to be more than that. It defies any logic put on it by outside people. It has its own logic
Mm.
and its own sense. And part of the way of defeating these beasts who come once every 100 years or so is to make some of the Blades of Dawn, some of these kids, um, enter into, or vice, maybe the other word, have the black enter into them, which gives
Join
them,
with the black.
yes, which we'll also talk about. And we'll talk about maybe some of the powers that come from that. Um, it is a really interesting book. The chapter, well, let's get into it. Hunter, what did I miss in the summary?
Um, Not too much really. As a general summary, I could talk about the day night cycle. Um,
Yes, tell me.
yeah,
So, Hunter, that's actually one of my first questions for you. Is, as we're saying, the day night cycle is different. It's not like ours. Took me a few chapters into this book to kind of figure out what was happening. Can you tell us about how that works in this world?
yeah. So I imagined the it's a fantasy novel, but I imagined the world as a planet, and I thought it would be cool if it had a different day night cycle. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so um, this planet rotates twice per year. So each time it completes an orbit around the sun, it has rotated twice, which means um, there are 6 months of day and 6 months of night, kind of like in Antarctica or in the Arctic, um, near the North Pole. Um, and that means that the inhabitants of this fantasy planet, um, they don't track days by days. So one of the
Yeah.
hardest things for me writing was not using the word day as to
Mm,
refer to, like, I can't say like yesterday, because yesterday for them would be a whole year ago.
yeah.
So that's where I found the term full day, and I tried to
Mm-hmm.
use that to kind of differentiate it as a full day is a year. So
Mm-hmm.
um, someone who's 15 years old is actually 15 full days old. And they track a 24-hour period with their moon, and because their moon um, orbits on a 24-hour cycle. Ours actually is close to a 24-hour cycle, I believe, um, as well. So that the moon is
Yeah.
similar. Um, and so they track days. They don't call them days; they call them moons. It's 24-hour periods. So like 3 moons ago, you know, last time the moon rose. Um, so that was a challenge for me, is coming up with that terminology and being consistent with it, and editing it out when I made
Yeah.
mistakes. um,
So when it's night, how dark is it?
Very dark. So if you've ever been, you know, outside at nighttime,
Mm-hmm.
um, you'll notice that as the moon goes through its um, phases, uh, the bright it can be very bright outside when there's a full moon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I mean, I love the moon. I sometimes I just go outside and stare at it before I go to bed. um, Maybe that's a little weird. I'm not a werewolf, I promise. But
Or a chihuahua, if it's just a
yeah,
crescent room. That's,
yeah. I mean, the moon's so cool. Like if you just go outside and look at it next time there's a full moon, it's so cool. Um, just to be standing there and looking out into this object in space, so close to us. But when the moon sets also. So like when it's night, it's that 6 months of night. Even if there's a full moon that comes around and it's fairly bright, people can see. When that moon sets, it is a deep night. So I imagine that
mm-hmm.
as kind of like um, when the moon is when you can barely see it um, on Earth. It's quite dark.
That's one of the things I enjoyed as reading it, as I've read through this a couple times, is you pay attention to the details, right? You focus on the scientific aspects of the world. There's a lot of points where you describe weapons using the terminological names,
Mm,
the correct terminology. Like it's very clear as I've read through that you aren't trying to just throw something out there. That each word feels like it's been chosen.
mm,
Um, and that's a different type of writing than some fantasy sci-fi that's going on nowadays. And so I'm actually interested. Who is it that influenced you? Right? Are there any storytellers or stories that you kind of saw coming up throughout this?
Um, I had a lot actually. I mean, I think any writer has,
Hmm.
when you sit down to write, you are influenced by everything that you've read. Um,
Yeah.
but for this one, obviously Tolkien. I think I might have said this before. There is no room for anyone else on my fantasy list uh, because I love Tolkien so much. But and I think because of that, my thought was that Tolkien did it about as good as you could do it. Um,
Mm.
Telling that kind of uh, mythical story um, of good versus evil,
Hmm.
and the struggle between good and evil, and um, how it can be hard to choose good sometimes, and
Yep.
Frodo's struggle, and Smeagol, um, and all of that. It's just a wonderful story. And so when I first started writing this story, it was very different. It was different from what it is now. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it was pretty derivative. Um, it was
Okay.
honestly, the bad guy was kind of like Robert Jordan's bad guy. What's his name? The
You talking about the
Bowles.
evil one, or are you
Yes,
talking about
Balsamon.
yeah,
Is that it? Yeah,
Baalzamon?
yeah, kind of
So I
like
mean
that.
that shows how far you've gotten into Wheel of Time, if that's who you think the ultimate evil one is.
Oh, okay. Well,
Mm.
in the first three
Mm.
books, it's, um, but he was a very vocal bad guy. There were elements that I kept, like the black was originally in there, and the Blades of Dawn, that was an original thing. Like the first scene I ever wrote was um, just Kavar sparring with another student at
Mm-hmm.
the castle, and I had no idea really what it was. I just had this, you know, I just was an image,
Mm-hmm.
and but I ended up writing like 30,000 words, and then I threw them out and started over because
Wow.
I read it back, and I was like, this has been done,
Mm.
and I don't think I can do it better, and I want to try something different. So a lot of what this story became is me trying to avoid tropes, um,
Ah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and the just like imagining a fantasy world as an actual planet, and trying to figure out like the orbital mechanics of it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say exactly where that came from, but I read a fair amount of science fiction, um, and I have a big interest in theoretical physics, and I love um, kind of thinking about those. And I have to give a shout out to my friend TJ, who is a physics major. And I
Mm.
have talked to him a lot about this book and the scientific um, parts of it, especially the orbital mechanics and all of that, and the way the moon orbits and that how that works. Um, he helped me a lot. Uh, but I'm trying to I'll try and get more specific, I guess. There were actually Horizon Zero Dawn um, was a game that I was playing while I was writing a lot of this,
Okay.
and Horizon Zero Dawn is set in the far, far future when
Okay.
humanity as we know it has gone extinct, and now there is this kind of new humanity that lives in kind of these tribal societies, and the world is ruled by these machines. Um, and I knew it was related, but struggling to find a concrete.
Are they? Is there a similarity between them and the beasts?
Um,
Or
I mean, the beasts aren't machines.
of course. Yeah.
I I just thought of the connection to Horizon Zero
Okay.
Dawn because they talk about the old ones, right? They have
Yes.
the ruins of a basically like very high tech kind of cyberpunk human feature. All
Mm-hmm.
the ruins from that age, skyscrapers and
Mm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They're still there, and these humanity doesn't have a historical knowledge, so they just call them the old ones. And um, uh, I have old ones. I think
Yeah.
I think I
Yeah.
actually call them old ones.
Yes, you do.
It's not.
That's the wording.
Yeah, they're not. They're not humans. I
Okay.
know that much. One of the things I discovered
Mm.
about writing, um, writing my this is the first book that I've ever finished. I've tried to write other ones, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the first one I finished, and I think I'm borrowing from this analogy from Stephen King, that it's like archaeology. You kind of uncover a story as you
Okay.
go, um, and you know I threw out 30,000 words,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't have been able to write the book that it is now if I hadn't
Mm.
written those 30,000 words and
Mm-hmm.
discovered different things about the story and the world and the characters. Um, kind of the lore is that the old ones created humanity.
Mm-hmm.
They don't humanity doesn't really know, um, because they have these really pretty serious cataclysms. Every few hundred years. It's not an exact time period. It's kind of random. So it could be like 70 years between a cataclysm, or it could be like 120 years between a cataclysm. So it's not um, it's not exact, but that means that like you know they probably their technology is set back a bit, and
Yeah,
they lose a
definitely.
lot of cultural knowledge depending on the severity of the cataclysm and how the blades handle it. And because the beasts are like they're just so scary. They're not like, I mean, I tried to make them scary,
Oh, they're
and
terrifying.
cool,
Yeah.
and like, but they're just like beyond any capability of humanity by themselves to defeat, and that's why they
Mm-hmm.
have to join with the black. Um, and so the going back to the old ones, the lore is that the old ones created humanity as kind of like a slave race, and it's not clear whether humanity had, uh, I guess, a conscience or like sentience
Hmm.
at first, but eventually developed it. And then the myth in this world that everyone kind of, the cultural knowledge of the myth of them is that they, um, humanity, once they became self aware, they killed the old ones. They rose up and they slaughtered the old ones. And so the
Hmm.
old ones aren't there, but there are ruins of the old ones around. Um, and I think another aspect of Horizon Zero Dawn that probably influenced my story is, um, I tried to be rather vague about the races of the people, the color of their
Yeah.
skin, um, and not to like try and avoid the issue, but if humanity is a created uh, race in this world, then like um, people can be of all different ethnicities, and um, it's not. I don't know. They might think about race differently than we do,
Yeah.
uh, and it's. I know there are flaws in the story, and I do my best, and I think what I've
Mm-hmm.
got is pretty decent, for a first book. Is how I view it. I think I'm a lot better writer now, but and hopefully book two will reflect that. But I'm when I go back and read it, I'm doing the audiobook. Sometimes I get scared when I go back to read it, and I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna hate this. It's gonna be
Yeah.
awful. And then I read it, I'm like, you know what? It's all right. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good
I
start.
agree.
So
So yeah, I definitely I do tell friends and family like, hey, this is a first book, and I recommend it. I feel like many other people's first books you wouldn't recommend. Be like, yeah, give it some time. Um, I know there are many other influencers and influences for this book, and maybe they'll come up in the conversation. But one I kind of wanted to touch on before we dive into the next question comes at the end of chapter 5, page 30. Um, it's when Kavar is chastised for trying to break into the library, and the librarian, says, "Hey, I'll deal with him instead of Marith, who's the prelate, the
oh
leader of the
yeah.
Blades." And the chapter 5 ends with the statement, "As you wish." So to me, there's clearly a Princess Bride influence in
Sure.
in this writing.
Very clearly, it's undeniable. I guess.
There's some ROUSs in one of the
Yeah.
forests with the
Well,
green men.
actually, Some of the more subtle references, they're kind of coming back to me now. But Muriel, his name actually, his name is Percy Muriel. And around the time when I was writing this, I had recently read Les
Mm,
Miserables by Victor Hugo. And so Muriel is a reference to a character in Les Mis. It's kind of like I take a little bit from one name and another bit from another name. I don't actually remember the specifics, but it's from Les Mis. I believe it's Marius's grandfather is part of the name. Another one of my favorite lines is, oh no, wait, that's in book 2. Never mind.
okay.
Sorry.
Hunter, two of the major pieces of this book that we need to talk about in order to kind of give people a taste of this are the blades and the black. So, can you talk first? I think talking about the black makes sense to start with that, and
Yeah.
then talk about the blades of dawn. What is the black, or as Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy might say, is why is the black? Um,
um,
we got to know.
the black is an appetite. It is
Hmm.
the arrow of time. It is um, the force that um, stokes our worst nature. It is kind of my, I guess, visualization of uh, the darkness in humanity. That's where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
In this story, in this world, the black is I guess you could say it's an entity if you wanted to really try and
Mm-hmm.
define it. It is an entity um, that appears to have sentience, but mainly it wants death. It feeds on death. And
Mm-hmm.
so the idea is that the black was kind of awakened to this world
Mm-hmm.
um, by the slaughtering of the old ones, by all that death. It
Hmm.
became aware of this world, and then it pinched the fabric of this world together with the world of the beasts to kind of create the cataclysm that happens. And so the idea is, if you know any theoretical physics, there's a lot of weird stuff with like string theory and a multiverse and all that kind of stuff. It's not a Marvel multiverse, but it's there's the idea of the Marvel multiverse. Doesn't come from nowhere. Um, but the idea is that the black is kind of this force that is powerful enough to pinch the fabrics of two worlds together and create this kind of thin place, and that's how the convergences happen and the beasts come through. Um, but it's also the black is more than that. It's kind of it's tricky and deceptive.
Mm-hmm.
Part of I mean, it's part of the plot in the way that it is
Yeah.
deceptive.
Well,
And
and I want to clarify for listeners, it is much more evil than Venom.
right,
Right, but because that's kind of an idea of what it could be like, right? Is this
sure,
substance,
yeah,
kind of like
it's
Spider-Man
this.
3? It's not like that.
It's not
Um,
corporeal. It's
Even though once somebody has joined with the black, it
yeah,
impacts, and they do they hear a voice? Is that correct, or is it
not
just like
really a voice.
nudges?
Yeah, kind of nudges. The black kind of laughs. Part of Blades. The black grants them these powers, and their eyes turn black, completely black, um, and they age slower. they're
Hmm.
stronger, they heal faster. It enables them to fight the beasts. But at the same time, because the black has an appetite for death, the black kind of stokes the worst impulses of the blades, their
Hmm.
violence, and part of the struggle of being a blade is trying to rein in those impulses and utilize the black in order to save humanity from the beasts and the convergences and uh,
Yeah, I think that's an important thing, and I don't want you to tell about all of the powers. I know in the first kind of we talked through three, but one of them
mhm.
is like fate, the ability to phase in
Yes,
and
this is
out.
probably my favorite one. That was like the first one I thought of, I think. It's based on like the idea of quantum entanglement where something can be in two places at one time. And so they use the black, and I call it like stepping is how I kind of visualize it. They
Hmm.
step from one place to another. For them it's one step, but in the like physical 3D world it can be, like 20 meters away,
Hmm.
stepping from one place to another, where they kind of like phase out of one reality and they step back into reality in a different spot. Uh, and that's so most of the other a lot of the things with the black, like the powers, it's totally fantasy. This idea of this kind of
Hmm.
crazy
Oh, I
entity
love it.
thing
Yeah.
giving you powers, but the powers themselves are kind of, I tried to base them on like actual physics and like not just, you know, I mean, they're really cool. That's also another reason, and I think they're really cool, and I like them a lot. Um, but I tried to make like the mechanics of how they work and how they're conceptualized based on some form of physics.
Yeah.
um,
All right. That's good to know. So from there, we've started talking about the blades of dawn. Like, can you give us like a minute long like overview of who the blades of dawn are, why they exist, what they do?
um, so the Blades of Dawn are a group that has existed, ever since the first cataclysm. Um, and their purpose is to fight the beasts that come through the convergences, um, and basically make sure humanity doesn't get overrun by the beasts um, when the convergences happen. And the way that they do this is they train um, kids, from as young as they can get them. Really, sometimes like in this timeline, and in this time period, sometimes if there's like a noble who has a bastard child, they'll send the bastard to the Blades of Dawn. And if you're familiar with The Witcher at all, it's kind of a similar thing in The Witcher where they train the kids and train them to fight from when they're young. And other, Kavar is an orphan. Marith comes and finds him in the dungeon of Seagrim. And a lot of the other kids there are, they're essentially outcasts, and the unwanted is most of them who end up there. And the Blades feed them, they teach them to take care of them, but ultimately, you know, most of them are probably going to die in the fight against the beasts.
Yeah, it's not
Um,
really like highly moral, like moralistic. Like in our current society, we would not really look upon them as like, oh, way to go. But in
right.
this world, they are.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, they're the reason that humanity is still alive. Uh,
but humanity forgets, right?
yeah, yeah. So because there's not a predictable time between the convergences. Um, like I believe Marith's cataclysm, it took like 120 years. Uh,
130.
yeah, okay, 130. Correcting the author.
Sorry,
Um,
sorry.
yeah, but because it took such a long time that people kind of, one, they're scared of the Blades of Dawn. There's just kind of this group with like these creepy guys with black eyes, and like that steal their children. I mean, the Blades don't actually steal children, but you know, people start talking about them and they gossip about
Mm-hmm.
them and stuff. Uh, and I think, um, yeah, one could make the critique that maybe it's not so believable that if they have these like almost world-ending catastrophes every 100 years, like people might not forget, but also,
It's Middle Ages time. There's a lot of
yeah,
knowledge that's lost. It doesn't surprise me that there would be that. I didn't see that as unbelievable.
yeah. And I
Um,
mean, a lot of us have already forgotten about the pandemic. So,
the what?
um, the pandemic. Oh
That
yeah,
was the joke. That was
right.
right.
Yes,
Clearly,
COVID-19.
yeah. I'm
Yeah,
married to a pharmacist. This is the pandemic is not over, people. People are still
yeah,
getting COVID actually in higher numbers than previous time.
yeah.
But just wanted to.
So yeah, I feel like it's fairly accurate to human nature for people to forget and to mistrust the Blades. Um, and it doesn't help that most of the Blades are kind of like orphans or bastard children or
Mhm.
uh, you know the outcasts of society.
Thanks. That's helpful. Can you? This is just a little question I've had, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but why do they have to be kids?
Um, because of the timing of the cataclysms. So, like, if you took a 30-year-old and you started training them, and it took 70 years for the next cataclysm, they would be 100 by the time they were, supposed to fight. So, they have to train them as kids, to make sure that they are like kind of at the right fighting age, when the cataclysm comes.
So do they only start training kids once they think a cataclysm is coming?
Not exactly.
Okay.
I think they start training them after the first cataclysm is over. Maybe
Okay.
they wait a little bit, and then they start. That's what Marith did. He's the prelate of the Blades of Dawn, and he waited a little bit, um, and before getting kids to train, because Marith is like 70. Um,
Mhm.
he doesn't look. He has the black, so he ages slower. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. There's a lot of cool characters in this story. The character that I enjoy the most is character I enjoy the most, who has airtime, is the librarian Muriel.
Oh yeah.
Um, I think he's a really cool character. I also really like Yarrick. Um,
My wife likes Yarick too.
can you tell me who your favorite character was to write? Is there
Um,
anybody that you connected with?
in the first draft, Kavar was basically a self-insert. Um,
Okay.
and that was one of the things I just had to throw it out and do it over. And Kavar still is, I think, the most like me when I was 13. Um, he's not exactly like me. He's different, but I'd say in temperament he's the closest. But he's not my favorite to write. Kavar was actually very challenging to write because he was like me, and I
Mm,
had this idea of him as being kind of like me, and it was hard to kind of separate that and make him more interesting, as a main character. Because
I think
like,
you're very interesting.
oh, thank you. But Harry Potter is the least interesting character in Harry Potter,
That's true.
um, in my
Well,
opinion.
Ron,
Yeah, yeah. But like,
Hermione is the most interesting.
yeah,
Let's be honest. Who's the
that
best
was.
character? Who should have been the primary character? So
Yeah. But Yarick was a lot of fun to write because Yarick was, he makes jokes, he laughs. He's kind of he's not great at fighting. He really struggles, and he goes through a lot. Yarick
Yeah, he
gets,
put a lot of conflict in his life, like very,
yeah,
very quickly.
a lot of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was just,
Unfair.
sure, yeah. I mean, part of it, I mean, some of it is based on some experiences that I have, but I made them more extreme for in the book for dramatic
Okay.
purposes.
Whew.
But
So, wow, there's some things we have not talked about. Uh,
yeah, like what happens to his leg? That was, you know,
yeah, okay, that
that
makes sense.
pretty much happened to me. But uh, I actually, one of my favorite characters to write is Lothan.
Yes, tell me about
Uh,
Lothan. I wanted to ask you about Lothan. So Lothan is the High Inquisitor or the High Justice?
yeah, so
Mm,
he is a justice. In this world, they have kind of like an independent justice who goes around and does the executions. So he's a headsman. He has an axe and he
mm-hmm.
executes people. That's what he does for a living.
He loves his axe.
Yeah, and Lindrel kind of like elevates his position. Lindrel is the Lord of Dindra, which is one of the richest um, fiefdoms. Basically, it's kind of a feudal
They call
society.
themselves a kingdom, so
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. And basically, Lindrel basically hires Lothan to be like the High Justice
mm,
for this new. Lindrel wants to unify the realm
hmm.
and be king. And Lothan is a headsman who really likes his job. That was my first idea
Yes.
of him. he he is kind of a sociopath. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dexter,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that was kind of an inspiration
Okay.
for Lothan. Is just this kind of this guy who really likes chopping people's heads off. And I think there's actually a line in there where Lothan says, if he hadn't become a headsman, he probably would have ended up on the block. Um, but it was just fun and like uh, I enjoy dark humor, and Lothan gets a lot of dark humor.
All I could think of, or one of the things I was thinking of as I've read Lothan's character, is in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Um, the the race of politicians are like these giant slug people, and they interact with a lowling, one of these slugs,
Mm.
and short like really early on in the book, and his favorite part of his job is yelling, "Resistance is useless." And he just loves that. That was like that's his job, and he loves
Yeah.
doing that, and it gives him so much joy, and it doesn't matter who he's saying it to.
Hmm.
And so,
Yeah. Lothan really loves making people uncomfortable too,
mm,
especially
hmm.
the Dindrins. The Dindrins are probably the only like definitely coded. Um, they're basically white and Western. Um, is you can infer that in the book. But Lothan just loves kind of messing with these like very uh, stodgy captains of Dindra and stuff. Um,
That's funny. He's like the one fish in Finding Nemo who loves his bubbles.
yeah,
That's his feeling about his axe. Axe, 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 axe.
yeah, he
Bubbles,
loves his
bubbles, bubbles,
axe. It's a
bubbles,
nice
bubbles.
axe.
Mm-hmm. Look at that boulder.
One swing's all it takes.
Stunning. Um,
Hmm.
Hunter, one of the things that's really interesting in reading fantasy and sci-fi books is you see characters start in different places, go different places, and then come back together. And then you got to do something with them. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what that experience is? Is that, as a reader, when I read that, I'm like, oh, this is so interesting. But I don't think about that often from a writer's perspective. I assume that's got to be pretty challenging.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. I think one of the myths that I had to bust for myself in writing is I think when a lot of people start writing, and this was the case for me, I thought generally you just keep writing one word after another, and then at the end you have a book.
Mm.
Um, that is really not the case.
Okay.
Really, really not for me.
Hmm.
Some people uh, love to plan, and they plan out a whole book. Supposedly, I'm highly skeptical of that claim. Um, and for a long time, they were called planners or pantsers. I prefer the term that George R. R. Martin used. He rephrased the terminology to gardeners and architects. George
Mm.
is definitely a gardener, and I
Hmm.
think I would call myself, I lean to the gardening side very heavily
Hmm.
because I would try to plan out the plot, and do plot points. I even tried to do a couple chapters like that, and then I would start writing the chapter, and I'd be like, they wouldn't actually say that. My character wouldn't actually do that. They wouldn't think that. And so for me, it was a process of, you know, basically, I just had to set myself a word goal that I would try to meet every day, and just get, you know 2,000 words a day. That was like my most productive period. I was getting 2,000 words a day,
Wow.
and just working on the book. Really, it was really fortunate. I was able to focus on that for like 2 weeks. But you know, basically, just trying to. Anne Lamott, in a book called Bird by Bird, she talks about this kind of like looking through a 1 inch by 1 inch picture frame,
Mm.
and that's where you start in a scene. And I would just try to start with a sentence and visualize the scene, and what my character is thinking. And
Mm.
sometimes I would just sit there for like 20 minutes just thinking about the plot and everything, and then start writing. And so I that's how I got a lot of the draft material. And
Hmm.
then it gets harder after that, because you have a lot of draft material, and I got to a place where I like felt like I found the end of the book. I found where I wanted
Mm.
to end it. And the way I thought about plotting for this book was, I had one big climax that I was building towards, and that I knew where it was, and I knew what I wanted to happen.
Hmm.
And I just had to connect the dots to get there, and I did that through drafting. And and then in the rewriting is where you really start to write a book, where it starts to
Mm.
look like a book, because that's where you can take a step back and notice themes, or uh, try and find connections between the characters and their storylines, and figure out where you want to put them.
Hmm.
um, and a lot of the advice that I looked up, quote unquote advice, writing advice online, how to write a book, whatever. They say if you're writing your first book, you should try to limit your perspective characters. Try and stick with like one or two point of view characters. And I have way more than that. And yeah, it's hard. It's really hard because, uh, when I would sit down to draft, I'd have to choose, which character's perspective I was going to go into. And it was really just kind of what I felt, and where
Yeah.
the muse kind of led, wherever my thoughts were at the time. And
Yeah.
writing is very, for me, it's very personal, and it's is really connected to what I'm going through in my life, and what I'm thinking about. And um, it's also a very mysterious process to me as well. Um,
Hmm.
but it's different for everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And that's
Yeah.
actually something that I liked as I was reading this is the chapters aren't titled based off what happens in the chapter. They're titled based off of who the perspective is is from in the chapter. And I
Yeah.
think that's a pretty it's unique in that most authors choose not to do that. It's not.
That's from Game of Thrones, actually. George did that, uh,
Mm.
which really makes sense in Game of Thrones because there's a lot of characters, and I think it made sense for me. Something interesting that I'm actually working on a second edition, um,
Okay.
because the file service that I was using to back up all my files got corrupted,
Oh no.
and I lost my master manuscript
Oh my goodness.
of book one. So over the summer, I went through and I had it on Tapas, and thankfully I could copy and paste from Tapas, but I had to go chapter by chapter. So I took the opportunity to, uh, quote unquote, it took me a while to see it as an opportunity. Um, but, I don't make any huge changes, but, I feel like I've learned a lot, particularly in style and mechanics and stuff. So I, make little tweaks, not big things. I read it so many times when I was editing it, so I don't think it needs too much more, but just little things. And as I go along and I'm doing the audiobook, I kind of tweak it. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the changes that I made is I actually decided to just do chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3
Okay.
because I felt like I could introduce the point of view in the first sentence and it would be fine and it wouldn't
Mm.
really disorient the reader.
Yeah.
Um, but
Interesting.
it's a style thing.
Yeah. Well, it also prevents people from looking ahead to see which characters they should care about,
Right. Yeah.
because you're not afraid of losing some characters. And actually, that's one of the things that my character I was starting to get connected with. You get rid of them right away, and I am so frustrated with you for that.
Sorry.
And this character comes up and ties other characters together. But I know you know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to name this character. Um, I don't think you did right by this character. I really want to see some type of multiverse ability for this character to come back. Um, but
Sorry.
it leads to uh, one of my it leads to my favorite visualized scene in this book, which is one of the things that I think makes this book really unique. And I'm going to read it. It's just a paragraph, just over a paragraph in the 12th chapter. And this is the moment. This is a character who's died. And when this character died, they're part of the Blades of Dawn. Their body is put on a funeral pyre because it's currently night. And as dawn comes, as the first lights shoot across the sky, that's where we're going to pick up. The Blades did not speak words to commemorate the beginning of a new day. There were no songs or platitudes that attempted to assign meaning. Dawn was reserved for reflection. Finally, it came. One moment, the glow of light on the horizon was visible, and the next, a single pale ray shot across the expanse to the castle. It caught the spire of the watchtower and cast a shadow on the large semicircular dial in the outer courtyard. An instant later, Kavar heard a soft whoosh as the sunlight bounced off the mirror at the top of the tower and passed through the small glass positioned at the base of the pyre. The fire spread and the form was soon consumed. They listened while their friend burned. Do you have anything to share on that? It's my favorite scene.
Yeah. I think if I can go out of character and display some self-confidence, uh, I think that one of as I've practiced writing and really tried to do it seriously and get better at it, I think that one of my strengths is imagery. Uh,
Mm.
I think that's one thing that I'm naturally good at. It takes a lot of, I still have a long way to go, and I always will. But I think that's one thing that I'm naturally uh, inclined to be good at with writing, and that was because it's just kind of the way I write is I think very visually. Like when
Mm.
I
Mm-hmm.
Not to say I imagine it um, as a TV scene, uh, because one of the challenges actually in writing is because I had watched so much TV. Uh, you, it, I found that I was visualizing things as if they were happening on TV, and I felt the need to describe every little movement of the face
Mm-hmm.
or tone of voice, because that those things are very important on television. But in a book, you can actually get away with a lot describing a lot less of the particular detail,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and you can do so much. You can go so much deeper and really mess with
Yeah.
the reader's perception, and that's something that I'm trying to learn how to do. And I read a lot of classics and stuff, and uh, uh, classic literature, and I love to try and pick up on what some of my favorite writers do. But so when I say I visualize a scene, it's not like a TV scene. I visualize like being in that character's head, and I try to put myself directly in that moment. Like, what would
Mm.
I be feeling? What would I be thinking about? What kind of strange thoughts are running through my mind? Like, what particular
Mm-hmm.
details jump out to me as I'm standing there looking at the pyre? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a scene where I just had this like image of a character on a pyre, and the light coming, and like the like the symbolism of the light, the first ray of light coming
Mm-hmm.
over the horizon is just like too. It's too much for me to resist
Oh,
to
totally.
make that happen.
I
Uh,
think that should be the honestly the cover of this book.
mm,
Like that, it's that visually stunning. But sorry, please continue.
yeah, uh, yeah. So like that's where it comes from, and I try to put it in words, uh,
With
and
much
that's
success.
it. Thank you, thank you. You don't see all the failures in the book. I cut so many words, um, in addition to the 30,000 initially. But I mean, that's how the first scene of this book came to me. It was just this image of being a student at this
Mm-hmm.
kind of like assassination. It was originally like I thought of it as like an assassination school or something like that, and
Yep.
just this sparring. And that's the thing. Don't get me talking about HEMA, historical European martial arts, which is like, one of my pet peeves. I may have said this before. Watching a lot of fantasy TV is the fight choreography and
Mm.
the way that historical weapons and armor are portrayed on screen, and the way that they're used is just. I just try not to think about it anymore when I watch TV because it's too frustrating
Mm.
to actually take seriously. But like imagining the fight scenes and
Mm-hmm.
imagining exactly how, rather than just saying like they exchanged blows and leaving it
Yeah.
there, I tried to imagine it exactly how the blows would fall,
Mm-hmm.
and try to describe it in a way that's interesting and not
Yeah.
tedious.
Yeah.
uh,
I appreciated that.
but
That's it can definitely. I'm a very visual reader, so I saw a lot
mm,
as this was happening. Right as they're going through the swamps and the Green Man and the huge, you know, the gaping maw that swallowed up one of the people, and
yeah,
the bee-like creatures that are terrifying. That
yeah.
was just a scary scene. I didn't like reading that. It was no fun. Um, Hunter, I have kind of coming towards the end of our conversation for today. Um, on page 141, you write a song that a character sings. And one of the challenges I've had as a reader over the years is whenever I come to a song in a book, I read it and I want to hear it sung, but
Yeah.
I can't figure it out because I can see the rhyme scheme or these pieces. And I realized, as I was reading this today, actually sang a version of it out loud to my son.
Mm.
Thankfully, he's less than a year old, so uh, he's full of smiles instead of like, "Ooh, Dad, that didn't sound good." But I realized I have the unique opportunity in this moment to ask the author how a song goes. Can you sing it for us?
So this is one of the things that I'm working on for the second edition,
Okay.
is making sure that all of the songs are actually songs.
Okay.
And I'm ashamed to admit that I haven't gotten to this one yet. I have an
Okay.
idea of what it might sound like, but I haven't actually like sat down and sang it. I do have one from book 2 that I can
Okay.
actually share. It's not a spoiler.
Yeah. Go for it.
That I've actually sung. um,
Love to hear it.
Gotta take a sip first. It's like strange. It's so nerve wracking, but it really shouldn't be because there's actually no one listening but you.
I'm really, really excited. I've not heard this before, so I'm very excited. I haven't read book 2 yet.
Okay. Far over the horizon, there is a shore of light, no dark, no black to threaten, but till I sail, it is my right to say, with my blade and my life, dawn must follow night. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I know that
Yeah.
that could be a very kind of a very vulnerable moment.
Yeah.
So, Hunter, I wanted to make sure before we finish that I shared one of my favorite one-liners in this book. It is while a character named Nestor is entering Seagrim,
Old
and
Nestor.
it's just kind of he's over. This is not a character that you like. It's not a character that has a lot of at least a lot going on in at least this book. Or at least at this point in this book. Speak more clear there. But as this character is walking to the city, he's overhearing things, and so here's a couple paragraphs of things he's overhearing. I swear it, I'm a much better juggler when I'm drunk. You ever see a man eat fire before? How about a knife? Cyrus the Great has defeated the spirit of the night once more. Rejoice! And then here's my favorite line. There is only one God worth worshipping, and his name is Fish. I think that's hilarious.
Thank
Uh,
you.
I read it. I reread it. Obviously, I made sure to bookmark it. Thank you for sharing so much of what led to this book, pieces throughout it. For our listeners who have not read it yet, um, what is your hope for somebody to take away from this discussion, but even more so from joining the ever growing group of people who've read Dawn Must Follow Night?
um, I I really hope you enjoy reading it. Um, I think there are a lot of books out there nowadays that, how do I say this? They're not respectful of your time.
Mm,
um, and I try to be. I worked really hard to cut down a lot of the words. It's not very long for a fantasy book. Um, and I put me into it. And
hmm
so it's a first book. As time goes on, I see more and more flaws and inconsistencies and things. But all of that said, I think it is worth your time, and I hope that uh, you will become a blade of dawn.
mm,
uh, it's kind of a cheesy thing to say, but I think as I've, I'm writing book two and discovering more of the story. Uh, the blades are really, for me, they're the good ones in
mm,
this world. They're the people that go unnoticed, that still do the right thing um, when no one is watching.
yeah.
Uh, all the people that went to work at grocery stores and hospitals, and uh, they're not asking for recognition or trying to sell you
hmm
something. They're just trying to do the right thing. So,
Yeah. That's awesome.
yeah.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing with us. I'm really excited to um, discuss book two as that is being worked on. Um, and thank you for making this podcast happen. I know for our listeners out there, you hear both of us talking. Hunter, after each of our conversations, um, does all of the editing, all of the publishing, make sure that the show notes have links to the things that we say the show notes will have links to. Um, and has really helped make this podcast happen, and then does the dirty work behind the scenes. And so I want to say thank you for that. I have absolutely loved the last, was it, we've been doing this for about 4 months,
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
3 4 months,
something like that.
of doing this podcast with you. I think we've talked about a lot of really great things. I want to encourage our listeners to check out an episode or two of something you haven't read and don't think you're interested in. Um, I really think our Fool's Crow episode is one of our better episodes.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's one of the strong ones. I also think our Edgar Allan Poe episode was pretty good.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I've enjoyed being pushed to read things and watch things and listen to things that aren't on my typical list,
Yeah.
as I hope you have as well, Hunter.
Yeah. No, thank you for really being the impetus to do this, and for being you. Um, just y- it would be such a shame to waste an Eric when you've got him, and when he's when, he, when he's such a good friend, and I've enjoyed it so much, and yeah, I mean, listen to the episodes, and like if you get in partway through and you feel like you want to read the thing, uh, turn our podcast off and go read it, because
If you like what you
uh,
see, turn off the TV and do it.
yeah, because
Zoom.
I think for me, other than just like having a lot of fun hanging out and talking and joking and talking about art and everything
hmm
and writing, if I had a goal for the podcast, it would be to encourage people to to read and listen, to
Mm-hmm.
watch, engage with art that's not only good, but is good for you. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what a lot of my favorite stories that have shaped me
Mm-hmm. That's true.
are good for me. And it's not about it. It's not about things being better. We've said that a lot, that we're not about rating things.
Yeah.
It's my favorite analogy to talk about art is food, because it's like the difference between going out to Olive Garden and getting a spaghetti dinner and having a homemade spaghetti dinner with homemade
Mm-hmm.
sauce and good spaghetti and meatballs and
Yeah.
you just think about your favorite foods and meals. At least for me, you know it's about the people who make them. It's about knowing the ingredients in them and just having a nourishing
Mm-hmm.
meal. And that's my favorite art is
Yeah.
nourishing to me. And I hope we can encourage people to find art and engage with art that's
Mm-hmm.
it's nourishing for you too.
Yeah.
And yeah, um, and hopefully in season 2 we'll learn to master the exit. I think that's one of the things that we got to work on is the exit, because we're always saluting on the camera when no one can hear us at the end.
I thought those worked. It's just always fade off into nothing of us just kind of continually rambling onwards. Um, and with that, we wish all of you a Merry Christmas, a happy 2022. We will talk with you again in the new year. We've got a few things planned that I think are going to be really cool and kind of stretch us. We're
Mm,
going to be talking about the first 2 weeks about a story and a storyteller that are outside of what we've talked about so far in this podcast. Um, and and I hope you'll give us grace in that and be challenged and encouraged by that. I know I'm excited, and I hope all of you are as well. So,
yeah,
Hunter, I will. I wish you a Merry Christmas,
yeah,
and I will see you back in this space in the new year.
yeah. And another full day.
Another full day. Catch you on the dawn side.
Like, damn it, that devil lived.